began to compact the soil. Peapodong's skill, puffing out its cheeks level 1. The animal puffed out its cheeks and spat out a boulder. The stone plopped down in front of the hero. The young man smiled and was glad that the problem with the heavy equipment was solved. Lloyd walked down the corridor, his hands in his pockets. He wondered if people would be suspicious if the guy suddenly showed up with this magical creature. The hero grinned and decided that he would carry a summoning book with him and tell everyone that he was a genius summoner. The nobleman looked ahead and remembered that it was time to solve the problem with workers for a large-scale construction project. The next day, the young man stood in front of a group of people with shovels and ordered them to repeat after him. He squeezed the handle of the tool and shouted that safety was above all. The 30-man Frontier Barony army looked at the gentleman absent-mindedly and sluggishly repeated the phrase. The brown-haired man smiled tensely and thought that these guys looked like soldiers who were paid but did not work. He was surprised that they had not been dispersed yet, considering that the Baron had a lot of debt. The boy smiled and pointed out that that was why they wouldn't get any overtime bonuses. It was good that they had manpower. Lloyd frowned and shouted that they were soldiers, and when they got together, they were an army. The hero threw his shovel over his shoulder and said that their essence was to complete tasks. The young man remembered that when he was in the army, they did more digging and weeding than trading. The nobleman pointed to a pile of earth and said that he dug it up after working all night. In fact, Peapodong dug it all up in half an hour. The brown-haired man put his hand on his belt and shouted that the first task was to revive the estate. This was a boiler room project for the people of the estate. To make it, the soldiers had to move the earth to the construction site. The men looked at the master with disappointment. The hero had expected them to react like that. Someone came up behind him and called out. The senior knight of the Newman barony looked at the young man in surprise and asked what he had ordered his men to do. Lloyd smirked and thought that he had expected the man to speak up. There were 3 knights in this estate: Newman, his subordinate Bairn, and the protagonist of the novel, Xavier Asrahan. At the beginning of the novel, only Bairn and Xavier remained loyal until the